Hello, and welcome to The Right Can't Read, a show about how conservatives don't understand how culture works. I'm Robert Sharkey, and I am joined today by my co-host and world-famous Instagram hiking influencer, Aaron Simon. So, Aaron, what is one piece of advice you give to young people who want to become famous for hiking on the internet?
Well, I gotta apologize in case my connection craps out because I'm right now up in the Yukons, and
Because it's 1840.
I'm really going back into the roots, and panning for gold, I think, it's my new crypto coin that I'm trying to launch by going up into the Yukon coin, and it's going to be minted using blockchain gold. So my advice to you, the youth of today, as we face a complete societal collapse, is get into those hills before your neighbors are going to go too, but you need to go first. Quit your jobs, go into the hills. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get a chisel. You're going to want to get a chisel, find some rock, and just start going at that rock, because eventually you're going to hit gold dust, or gold bricks, or gold ingots.
Statistically, eventually that is true.
Yeah, and you can do it. Minecraft is a good training simulator for this. So that's my advice.
You heard it from the man himself, Aaron Simon. Go into the woods and hit stuff with a chisel.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, do you know who George Orwell is?
I think that's my neighbor who screams every night from midnight to 12:15 in the morning.
Exactly.
Is that who we're talking about today?
The author of 1984, who lives next to you in your apartment in Portland, Oregon, and screams late into the night.
Yeah, as a recovering literature major, I am, of course, aware of George Orwell.
The second question I have for you today is, how do you feel about getting really sad in the first 30 seconds after you wake up?
That's just what I do. I wake up and I look at these soaring vistas of the Yukons and I see the eagles flying, and I think that will never be me, and I get very sad.
And then post a picture of the eagle, hashtag deep, with that quote underneath it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's how you become an influencer.
In the hope that Elon Musk sees your cryptocurrency.
And tweets about it, and then I can
buy Dune, all of Dune.
All of Dune. I will. I love it. You gotta. There's a listener, in case you're not aware. There was a crypto group that bought a copy of the storyboard. It's a massive document for Alejandro Jodorowsky's version of Dune. So not even like a manuscript copy of the Dune novel or any of the Dune novels, but a storyboard for a movie that was never made. And they claimed that this gave them control of the copyright, and they were going to go and democratize Dune. I don't know if that's what the words they used, but they were going to open it up into the public. Just stupid. So that's what I'm going to do with my billions. Exactly. I will buy all of Dune.
Buy all of Dune.
I will buy out Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson's rights. And it will be nothing but I will be the new writer for Dune.
And it will just be the space Jews and dog chairs.
It will just be the space Jews and chair dogs.
Chair dogs.
No cat people. No, none of that shit. Sorry, futards. You're done. Don't read the last 2 books of Dune. Just don't do it.
I never will. Besides reading the last 2 books of Dune, there's another great way to be very sad immediately upon waking up in the morning.
Oh, that's right. That's what we were talking about.
Yep. Yeah. And that way, friends, listeners, and assorted errands, is to go on twitter.com.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
Now, being on Twitter is normally fine if you want to be depressed. It will get the job done. But if you're efficiently minded and want to achieve the optimal amount of despair in the lowest amount of time, you need to have 2 Twitter accounts. I have one Twitter profile for hearing real news. What? I have one.
Keep going.
I have one Twitter profile for hearing real news about how climate change is bad and the FBI is trying to control your thoughts through Avengers movies. Also to see pictures of titties and dogs. This account is very depressing, but it is based in fact and has pictures of titties and dogs. So its depression per unit time is still manageable.
It's still it's so weird to me that Twitter is a place for titties.
Yeah, leftist sex worker Twitter is the best part of Twitter.
What a world.
It goes leftist sex worker Twitter, rabbi Twitter, angry dad Twitter. That's the official ranking. And if there's ever a sex worker, angry dad rabbi, he will win the internet.
Oh boy, I'm sure there is somewhere.
God, that's a follow I need to have. So that account isn't depressing enough, which is why you have to have a second Twitter, an unbelievably worse Twitter. On this Twitter, you will get to hear opinions about how vaccines are bad and the Jews are trying to control your brain through the Taco Bell Burrito Supreme TMCR. There are no titties allowed on this Twitter. All the dogs are in Trump bandanas.
Oh no!
It is one of
so you still follow dogs on this second account?
Yeah, there's conservative dogs you can follow.
Okay. All right, but they just happen to have Trump bandanas.
Yeah, they're like conservatively branded dogs, America First dogs.
All right, I just didn't know if so is this like a balm, a bandage on the pain?
Absolutely not.
No, okay.
It's to make yourself truly depressed. That's what this one's all about.
All right.
It is the most effective way to make yourself suffer on the internet without diving straight into Nazi blogs or watching reruns of HGTV shows. Which are the only two worst things I can think of. The reason I bring this side of Twitter up is that it has a main character, and that isn't Tucker Carlson or Ron DeSantis or even Donald Trump. It is George Orwell. These people love this old-timey English author so much, they constantly use his name as a fucking adjective. A quick Google search will show you that according to Fox News, vaccine passports, critical race theory, Joe Biden's infrastructure bill, not being allowed to kiss chickens, are all Orwellian. I shit you not, it was a real Tucker Carlson.
I remember that one. It was like the one time that you could almost see Tucker Carlson's mask slip off, and you can see him. His eyes changed in a way that you could see him ask if he really wanted to keep doing this.
Is fascism worse? Is fascism better than watching a woman hold a chicken for the next 30 minutes of my life? Oh, good Lord. Yeah, so pretty much anything you don't like can be Orwellian if you really believe and you work in right-wing politics.
Really believe.
If you really believe.
It's like the Doc. I think that was a Doc Brown quote in one of the Back to the Future movies.
Famed right-wing influencer Doc Brown. So all this time on right-wing Twitter made me want to do an episode where we discuss the imperfect George Orwell, the right-wing's favorite communist. Who was he? What did his book say? How did a lifetime of socialist writing become an adjective used mostly by weird libertarians? Why did he choose to keep that mustache, knowing it was both very thin and very creepy? Stay with us while we try to answer all these questions and veer wildly off topic. Part 1. Curious George's humble beginnings with British yuppies. I want to start this pod by just stating outright that Orwell, while being heavily problematic in a lot of ways, was a leftist extremist who would have hated everything the modern right stands for. It's not really up for debate. He wrote a lot of political shit. He also fought and almost died in an effort to stop the spread of far-right ideology. But before we can get into why he would have been willing to personally murder Ben Shapiro, I want us to examine a few revealing moments from Orwell's life and see how he became so far left. Or just a perfect Barry. Take that out in post.
No, you got to leave that in. Barry is the godhead.
Yeah.
Who lives in my apartment.
The 30-pound godhead who's trying to dig in a cod in a couch.
There you go.
Oh, very big yawn. This is podcast related. Mitchell showed me a meme yesterday. I woke up in the morning and immediately handed me his phone, and it was the 2R meme, and on one side was your dog in the morning, and on the other side was conservative pundits, and the hands in the middle was, ooh, that's a big stretch. Oh, that's a winner. Victory.
Ooh, that's a big stretch. That's good.
Oh.
Yeah. The best thing is when you stretch at the same time as you, and you get to share that little moment.
But they never tell you it's a good stretch because all dogs are bastards.
All dogs are. Hey, Dab.
Hey, damn.
Hey, Dab.
Also, I have one more quick editorial note. It is my opinion that you should always mock British people. And I will throughout this episode.
Yeah, as you should. They have no teeth.
Exactly.
They eat nothing but cabbage.
Yeah, they are gross teeth, black pudding eating, shoes with buckles wearing freaks. Anything other than a complete rhetorical assault seems to lead to the lionization of these omnicidal weirdos from Her Majesty's Death Island. I don't know what it is about our culture, but we are way too susceptible to globe-trotting white dudes ruining country after country and then putting it all in a series of charming short stories. See Lawrence of Arabia, all of Rudyard Kipling, which I know you like, or any spy movie. You do like Kipling.
I do like Kipling. I think, he's got, the relic of colonialism and vicious capitalism and the East India Company and all that. But I think we're going to be doing this a lot in this episode. So correct me if I'm wrong on that. But my assumption is we're going to be saying for his time, he was okay.
Yeah. Anything you say about George Orwell is like, he was for his time.
Yeah, and Kipling very much falls into that. There are strains of Kipling acknowledging that what England did everywhere where it had holdings was reprehensible and horribly exploitative. Still a member of that caste of British civilization, so that's unfortunate. But he wrote some good ghost stories.
He did write some good ghost stories.
Yeah.
So we have to mock Kipling, we have to mock T.E. Lawrence, we have to mock Ian Fleming, and we have to mock George Orwell as, in some ways, history's clownish villains, because maybe if we mock every British imperialist ever, I will never have to talk to my dad again about which James Bond movie is best.
No, you still will. That's you, as long as you talk to your dad as a male presenting individual, you will have the conversation of which James Bond is best.
No, that is the point of this podcast.
Doesn't
canceling
matter.
James Bond.
No, we can't change anything. Nothing changes. We are throwing rocks into the ocean trying to kill Poseidon.
When the revolution comes, I will make no excuses for the James Bond related terror. Absolutely.
You and I both know the revolution will be both born and stifled, just smothered in its crib.
This is true. For reasons that George Orwell understands very well. We'll get into that later in the episode. So with all that out of the way, let's begin by discussing George Orwell's early life and how that radicalized him. So, Aaron, to really understand George Orwell's beginnings, you have to know that British people sometimes created things called colonies. Have you heard of colonies before? Colony. Yeah.
So in the video game Assassin's Creed Valhalla,
the documentary Assassin's Creed
Valhalla, the interactive documentary, you form a colony in England and make friends with a bunch of Saxons and, perplexingly enough, a Chinese woman who was living in your village, which I...
The documentary Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Yeah, the documentary Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Yeah, so that's a great little insight. So colonies, the British got really into it when the Vikings did it to them, and we're like, hey, that was really nice. Let's do it to everyone else in the world. A colony was when a small group of British people came together to decide they no longer wanted to live in a town named Upton Snodsbury. So they would all get together in the claymation countryside, pack up their crumpets, play one final game of tiddlywinks with friends and family, then get on a boat to discover somewhere that people already lived. If someone else had already discovered it, they would instead just murder everyone who lived there in an effort to open their own small business on a mountain of bodies.
Not unlike current American business practices.
Yeah, exactly. But like way more charming.
Way more charming
because very pastoral.
Pastoral. They wear tweed.
They do wear tweed.
They put little poppies on their lapels for Remembrance Day. There's a certain je ne sais quoi that the English have.
Yeah, it's kind of English colonization is kind of like Indiana Jones meets Jeffrey Dahmer in the style of Wallace and the take. And it was how George Orwell, whose real name is Eric Blair, was born in Motihari, India in 1903. His family was doing a colonialism, and George was from a long line of colonialism doers. And this is the first part of the story where we say that he was good for his time.
So if you're keeping track at home, this is one. Go ahead and take that shot.
Yeah.
You're gonna want to hold that bottle.
Yeah.
Close by.
Yeah. And a large pot of some kind.
Yes, because you're gonna be puking.
Yep. George's father was the brilliantly named Dick Wallemsley Blair.
Hell yes.
Very British. Very charming. British. Very yes. Wallace and Gromit.
Yep.
Richard worked in the opium department of the British colonial government of occupied India.
The opium department?
Opium department.
So I know intellectually they oversaw the harvesting and distribution of opium, and not just this is where we're going to throw everyone and just get them high all day.
That's what I really would have liked to think his job was.
Yeah.
But I assume it was probably just like a middle ground between loose street murder and selling cocaine at a playground. I assume that's most of what it was like paperwork about murder.
Yeah.
I've done no research, so don't at me on Twitter.
Why would we do research? That's not what the point of this is.
Yeah, he worked in the opium department of British India. I'm sure he killed a lot of people.
Do your own research.
Yeah.
You got to do your own research about this.
And buy Yukon Coin.
Yeah.
And Aaron Force Plus.
Yep. You can subscribe to my Discord channel for only $30 a month, and that gets you into the basic tier. The basic tier is when you can use emotes that I have designed myself.
Just pictures of your dog.
It's just pictures of Barry.
Yep. So his dad worked in the opium department. His mother was Ida Blair, who was smart, vivacious, and 20 years younger than her husband. She didn't have a job because misogyny. Everyone was misogyny back then, so Ida couldn't do stuff and was married to a man 20 years older than her.
Yeah.
In short, the Blairs were a super normal family for Britain at the time when George was born. But while the Blairs were normal, George was definitely not normal, kind of ever in his life. From the time he was young, he was an extremely gifted child, and this led to him being able to attend very fancy schools that a family of his economic status normally wouldn't be able to attend. In the States, we call them private schools, but in England, they're called public schools for some reason. As our resident England expert, what's the reason, Aaron? You've been to places named things like Canterbury.
Yeah, the reason it's called public school is I think it has something to do with the education being focused on a secular framework and not like a religious. But I'm not 100% sure on that. I did not associate with anyone who went to public schools. I went to university with people who came from places like Braintree in Essex and used to tell me about the knifings that they saw on a daily basis on the trains coming from Essex. Don't go to Essex. Essex is a bad place. If you go to Essex, you'll get knifed on the train. Someone will go up to you and they'll be able to tell that you're not from Essex and they'll knife you. Don't go to Essex. There's a horrible show about Essex called The Only Way is Essex. It's not the only way. There's so many other ways. Anyway, I have no idea. I didn't talk to anyone who went to those schools. The people who go to those schools are dandy fancy lads, and I don't associate with dandy fancy lads.
You can sort of think of these public schools as like the same function as the American Ivy League, like it is where the dandy fancy lads go.
Yeah.
It's like 1/3 social club, 1/3 school, and 1/3 place where they rip out your soul and replace it with the heart of a dying star whose gravitational hunger can only truly be satisfied by the complete destruction of all things good.
Yeah, and really there's like two routes out of this system, which really goes from birth until you exist in some weird department, some weird ministry in London. There are two paths. The first is you become a living embodiment of Her Majesty's government and enforce the will of our God Queen upon the face of the world, or you become a member of Pink Floyd.
That's did a member of Pink Floyd go to a fancy British public school?
Yeah, that's brick in the wall.
Yeah,
that's what that's about.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he went to a fancy dandy fancy school. Let me fact check myself on that one, but I think that's where.
That's why.
But yeah, like the Rolling Stones, I think they all went to, maybe not like Eton, but they went to more high-end education than like the Beatles did.
Dang.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. The Rolling Stones, not in fact. Yeah.
Oh shit. Well, this is cool. Roger Waters. This is now a Pink Floyd podcast.
Yeah.
His father was the son of a coal miner and Labor Party activist and a communist.
Dang.
That's pretty cool. So Waters attended a junior school in Cambridge, but not Cambridge. All right. So maybe I was mistaken about the dandy fanciness of the members of Pink
Floyd.
Yeah.
New communist icon, Pink Floyd's dad.
Exactly. Yeah, Pink Floyd, the frontman of Pink Floyd.
Yeah. Yeah. So these schools are kind of like Harvard, but for high schoolers. And George got into them over and over again, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
He and his family had the opportunity to, like you were saying, become a part of the British elite, like the top hat and monocle part of Britain. He was smart, academic, ambitious, and more than anything else, very white. In short, a hypothetically perfect student for these fancy British boarding schools. However, this is where George's life actually begins to get interesting. He hated the schools, and they absolutely hated him back. He hated these schools for way more reasons than I can get into here. But here is a quote from his essay, Such Were the Joys, where he describes what he learned at school. Great title.
That's a killer title.
Great title.
Yeah.
Quote, virtue consisted in winning. It consisted in being bigger, stronger, handsomer, richer, more popular, more elegant, more unscrupulous than other people, in dominating them, bullying them, making them suffer pain, making them look foolish, getting the better of them in every way. Life was hierarchical, and whatever happened was right. There was the strong who deserved to win, and always did. And there were the weak who deserved to lose, and always did, everlastingly. Yep.
Yeah, that sounds about, healthy.
Yeah.
Good time.
If any of you listeners would like to hear more about how George hated being sad, poor, and ugly at a British public school, I strongly recommend the essay Such Were the Joys. It's an interesting look into what you were getting into before about how education, parenting, brutality, and propaganda can kind of collide and trying to make a certain kind of person. Is what I think is so interesting about these schools.
It's like the schools are blenders for a healthy smoothie, but really the healthy smoothie just makes you despise anyone who does not come from your exact social station.
Yeah. George's argument, and I think ours too here, is that the brutality and vacancy of British education at the time was completely intentional. The goal was to turn young boys into emotionless, vicious, and brutal warriors for the British Empire. Maybe not like soldiers, but capitalists, politicians, and writers who would push specific agendas, turning the kids into the kinds of people who could do the horrors necessary to keep England very wealthy and very prosperous relative to the rest of the world. And you see like a big crowd in the British intelligentsia at this time, whether it's like Roald Dahl and Ian Fleming or Winston Churchill or kind of any of these people who are all like a very specific kind of British intellectual.
Yep. Wait a minute. Are you trying to say that Roald Dahl was not a cool guy?
Not a cool guy.
What?
Not a cool
No,
guy.
not
Did
Roald Dahl. I'm just gonna type in Roald Dahl accusations of anti-Semitism here on my. Oh no.
Was Roald Dahl an anti-Semite? I didn't know that one.
Yeah, there. I mean, I think in the way that a lot of these guys
Nice.
were like just uh was not fond of the Jews.
Said things like the Jewish question.
Yeah, I don't think he would ever go that way. So I just typed in Roald Dahl and Jews, and the first thing that pops up is yes, Roald Dahl was a Jew hater.
Question answered.
So this is a quote. This is not me being a self-hating Jew. There is a trait in the Jewish character that does provoke animosity. Maybe it's kind of a lack of generosity toward non-Jews. I mean, there is always a reason why anti-anything crops up anywhere. Even a stinker like Hitler just didn't pick on them for no reason.
Oh my God.
And then forward, the forward, a pretty prominent Jewish paper that's been around for ages, has an article about this. I'm certainly anti-Israel, and I have become anti-Semitic. So,
oh no.
Yeah, this is an unfortunate. So, all right, the listeners, if you're not a Yid, what we like to do amongst ourselves is play. Is that guy Jewish? Whenever we're watching TV amongst like family or friends, there's the dark side to that, which is, does that guy hate us? And the answer is more often than not, yes.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah.
My roommate was raised Catholic, and he told me a story yesterday about how when he was in Sunday school, they showed him a video that was just pictures of the Holocaust next to pictures of Planned Parenthood, and said they were the same. And I thought that was one of the all-time winners for goy shit.
Oh, God.
I've never heard anything more goy than that.
Well, I remember, and this popped into my head a little while ago after being buried. And one of the things my subconscious likes to do is make me think of all of the things that I fucked up in life and not telling people that they were being full of shit. So it chose this specific memory to throw at me at this given day. And it was we were in class, and this was like, this must have been middle school, and we were reading or talking about the Diary of Anne Frank, and the teacher does like the clean Wehrmacht thing, saying, well, the German army did nothing bad. They were just following orders. And I didn't say anything because I was 11.
Yeah.
But so that's right up there too.
Yeah, that is right up there too. Oh, good Lord.
Listeners, I hope you're having fun.
Yeah.
I'm about to crack open a beer.
Yeah. So, despite British boarding school's best efforts, they never succeeded in turning George Orwell into an Ian Fleming or a Winston Churchill. He always remained an outsider. Poor, small, spiteful George Orwell.
Man after my own heart.
Yeah, can really relate.
Yeah.
And these days at school made George realize the stark realities of British class warfare and hate the brutally repressive society that perpetrated it on him. And I think it was really the beginning of his road to leftism, was like being a scholarship kid at these schools.
That'll do it.
Yeah. As anyone who's been poor in any kind of rich space experiences, you get this sort of realization that they don't want you to be one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, now hold on. I'm gonna challenge you on that, because I read a book years ago, okay, co-authored by none other than former President Donald Trump. And in that book, he and the co-author, whose name escapes me at the moment, explicitly stated, we want you to be rich.
And all you have to do is send us $30.
And all you have to do is learn how to flip around real estate and evade taxes.
Such a simple answer. I should have thought of flipping real estate years ago.
Yeah. And the key And they wrote the entire book is to flip it around before any money changes hands, so you don't have to pay taxes.
He's gonna be president again in 2 years.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yep.
Gonna be cool.
Yep.
Yeah, but after many years of this schooling, his teachers, his headmasters, and his family were kind of done with George's shit. All he did at school was fuck off and hang out with friends and write.
Just carve Iron Maiden into desks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He was all of us in high school.
Yeah.
So George had to drop out and begin to work for a living. And he did what any reasonable and morally confused high school dropout does. He decided to become a cop.
I'm sure that went well for him. He sounds like the kind of person who would succeed on a police force.
Yeah. He has a good time. And that's the end of part 1. Need a break? Keep going?
I'll tell you what. Let me go grab a Guinness because I will want to pop that open in a minute.
Sweet.
Hold on. I know, Bear. I said stay. I explicitly said stay. You fool. You fool.
Spanish Civil War is crazy. I don't know how much detail to put in.
Yeah, because it's like one of those things where even if you're giving an overview, you spend like 40 minutes giving the overview.
Yeah, because you have to be like, so everyone else was having World War II. And the Spanish were like, we're going to have our own war over here. And then during that war, they decided to have another war against people who mostly agreed with each other.
Just nestling right in there.
Yeah, it's definitely the like Russian nesting dolls of conflict. Oh. All right. Part 2. Curious George does violence for the state. This is the second moment in George Orwell's life that I feel is worth focusing on. He once again, quite literally in this case, has the opportunity to become a successful soldier for empire. And once again, he is promoted and rewarded for his brilliance, and he loses the opportunity because he doesn't fit in with society's political and moral expectations. When he was 19, he joined the Indian Imperial Police, which I'm sure were about as great as the British Opium Department in terms of like being cool guys.
They were not good.
No.
I don't know if it was the Imperial, this specific branch, but there was one of the many revolts toward the end of the 19th century was it was a result of the English choosing to they were greasing gun belts with pig fat, and obviously neither the Hindus nor the Muslims were very in favor of that, and it turned into a massive revolt with shitloads of people dead. And I don't know that the Indian Imperial Police were a direct trigger for that, but at a certain point they all just kind of blend together.
Yeah, the Indian Imperial Police were actually a direct response to that, the Sepoy Rebellion.
There we go. Sepoy Rebellion.
Yeah. They were an organization formed after the Sepoy Rebellion because British people suddenly got very scared that having Indian cops in India means there would be armed Indians in India.
It's colonialism just distills itself further and further down to apartheid.
Yeah, until it's just like 7 dudes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So the important part is that George is like absolutely a fucking stormtrooper here. He's part of the Indian Imperial Police, which is like, it's right there in the name.
Yeah.
So he is the baddies. He signs up to be the baddies, and he gets on a boat to Myanmar. This isn't what we now consider India, but the British said it was back then because they don't give a shit what you think. So the Indian Imperial Police in Myanmar. Just like every other portion of Orwell's life, he was super smart, and he got promoted quickly. He was a rather successful cop in some ways. At his peak, he was a subdivisional officer, quote unquote, which is about as high as you can climb before you become a truly big cheese. A head honcho, if you will.
Big cheese, I believe, is the rank at which you get a full delivery of a wheel of cheese at your desk every week so that you can have a proper tea break.
Wensleydale.
Yes.
Yeah. subdivisional officer was partially responsible for keeping more than 200,000 Indian people oppressed. And he was raking in like $4,000 a month adjusted for inflation, which is a pretty sweet gig if you're into like class traderdom.
Yeah.
$4,000 a month. It's tempting.
Yeah. It's more than I make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't even get a nightstick.
And now they took that away from me.
Yeah.
Because I allegedly was going into the printer room and just attacking people if they used the kind of paper I don't like. Allegedly, you can't prove that.
Yeah. And now you're confined to beating people to death with Excel spreadsheets.
Right? Ugh.
Those bastards.
Rat bastards.
However, even making all this money and with this fancy job, George, once again, just like school, didn't fit in. He didn't fit in because he actually knew people from Myanmar, unlike all the other cops. He learned the Burmese language. He hung out with the locals. He got local tattoos. He attended churches for the Karen ethnic group. He, in some ways, became as much a part of Myanmar culture as a white dude whose job is to kill people in Myanmar can.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the cardinal mistake of colonialism, and obviously made him sympathetic towards the very people he was supposed to be oppressing for the Raj.
It's the whole term of going native.
Yeah.
If you go native, then you lose your perspective on what you're there to do.
Yeah, which is part 2 of woke for his time.
Yeah, exactly. That's a shot. Take a shot.
Yeah, exactly. Shot number 2.
Yeah.
He thought that people from Myanmar were, in fact, people. You didn't think you had to treat them very well, but he thought they were people, which good for his time.
Yeah. Yeah, arguably that's good for now.
Yeah, that's fucking true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Better than Roald Dahl and the
lots of people in the Jews and lots of people in Arabs, and we're not a good species. We should just give control to the dogs.
Yes. The true leaders of the world.
Yep.
Yeah. So obviously George's sympathy for these natives would become a stumbling block on his ability to do his job. So much so that when he got a really bad case of dengue fever and was sent home to Britain for a year, he just flat quit.
That refers to the very fun Cambodian band out of LA, right?
Yeah, he got a really bad case of that band from LA.
Yeah. All right.
And was sent home. They were like, this rocks too hard, George.
George, this rips. You got to go back to England and listen to fiddle music.
Whatever the fuck the harpsichord is.
Oh, it's clangy piano. That's all a harpsichord is.
Piano.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So he would never return to Burma. He quit and just like walked out on another opportunity for a life of relative affluence and a promising career doing a colonialism.
And like on a serious note, Burmese Days is a really good book.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah. Which you can see a lot of woke for his time George Orwell shit in. Yeah. While it was during his time in school that George learned to hate the kind of intellectual soldiers of empire, it was his time in Myanmar that showed him like the very real horror of life under the empire. And he learned the obvious lessons about living under colonialism as a resident of Myanmar. But the thing he really walked away with was the less obvious one, which you can find in his short story, Shooting an Elephant, or in Burmese Days. But this quote's from Shooting an Elephant. I chose this one, Aaron. Fuck you. Quote, I perceived in this moment that the white man turns tyrant in his own freedom that he destroyed. I perceived, starting from the top of the quote, I can read things.
No, you can't.
Starting from the top. Open quote. I perceived in this moment that when the white man turns tyrant, it is his own freedom that he destroys. He becomes a sort of hollow, posing dummy, the conventionalized figure of a sahib. For it is the condition of his rule that he shall spend his life trying to impress the natives. And so in every crisis, he has got to do what the natives expect of him. He wears a mask, and his face grows to fit it. I had got to shoot the elephant. I had committed myself to doing it when I sent for the rifle. To come all that way, rifle in hand, with 2,000 people marching at my heels, and then to trail feebly away, having done nothing? No, that was impossible. The crowd would laugh at me, and my whole life, every white man's life, was one long struggle to not be laughed at.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a bleak sentiment.
Yeah. Very bleak. And I think
my God.
really gets across the fact that colonialism is horrible for the people under it, but it's a weird hollowing out of the people who perpetrate it.
Yeah.
I think about
Man.
yeah. In some ways he's saying, I think, that colonialists sacrifice their own humanity, that doing that kind of oppression makes you a stock character rather than a person.
Mm-hmm.
I think of whether it's British colonialists, which are a less culturally poignant figure, or the fact that Nazis have sort of stopped existing as a group of people and are now just villains from video games, or Stalin's Russia, which is less shit.
Yeah. Stalin. I think what you're saying, and I believe we can put this on the record, is the Soviet Union was the perfect government and did nothing wrong.
Yeah. Stalin did nothing wrong.
Yeah. All those deaths in Ukraine had to happen for the glory of the Soviet Union.
They were trying to.
That's just the way it is. Yeah.
It led to a 0.3 percentage gain in average grain production, Aaron.
Exactly. This is the scientific dialectic materialism that needs to happen under a true international socialist regime. And if you don't get that, then fuck you on Twitter, man. I see your accounts.
I'm going to send you to the Ukraine. Oh, yep. That is my opinion. All colonialists have a hollowed out dead inside, except for Stalin's Russia and the bullet Raytheon. Yeah. And I think this realization was George Orwell's step number away from British conservative ideology. So he sort of realized class warfare exists, and then he became one of the people perpetrating it and realized that even benefiting from it, even if he was at the top, would be a failure for him, which I think is a really obvious move to the left.
Yeah, acknowledging your role in the system, what the system is doing to other people and yourself and your society, and then stepping away from that and trying to rectify.
Yeah, and this is underscored by another quote of his, which I disagree with, but also he said in The Road to Wigan Pier, which is another one of his works, in order to hate imperialism, you have got to be a part of it. Which I think is really kind of hammers this point home in some ways.
Yeah. Do you think that's him trying to express the depths of what actual hate is? It's not perhaps one could argue that it is not enough to intellectually know that something is wrong and to fight against it, but to actually be a part of it means that you experience it and you feel it within the fiber of your life, and that allows you to actually hate.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good interpretation of that quote, actually. Yeah, that visceral experience of colonialism.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah, and
it's like how my dog hates socialism.
Yeah,
and
Barry Kissinger.
Right now, he's sitting here glaring at me because he knows that we're talking shit about imperialism.
Yeah, you just the money will trickle in from the colonies and then down, Aaron. Barry knows. The U.S. did nothing wrong to the OPEC nation. Barry. So that will be the end of part 2, and I'm just doing part 1 about Orwell's life here because we're probably pushing time on one episode.
Okay, so you we're still aiming for about an hour per episode. Then we're not going to go into that realm of podcasting where we're going to have 3-hour episodes.
Yeah, the 3-hour stream of consciousness.
You don't want to go with the blank check school of podcasting where it's just rambling for an hour and a half before you start talking about the movie.
I mean, I could.
Yeah,
not a bad idea.
Yeah, those are pretty.
We kind of do that.
Well, yeah.
Make editing easier.
Yeah, that's it's Gonzo podcasting, man. That's
realism.
Exactly. So you're still working on the co-optation side? Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, I thought we were going to go longer. That works for me.
Yeah.
So do we
I have a third section here, so we probably have
do you want to
another 20 minutes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I thought we were
10,
done.
15, 20.
Yeah.
Which is just about his time in Spain, which is the only other part of his life I really give a fuck about.
Oh, okay. Let's do it.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Part 3. Curious George kills fascists.
So every time you lead in with a Curious George does X, if can you draw?
No.
Oh.
But I should come up
learn
with a
to
series
draw
of Curious George Orwell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So learn to draw, and then we'll start doing this. And then I'm not gonna write it. I'm just the ideas guy. Yeah. So I think
it'll be Curious George and Karl Marx as the man in the yellow hat. Teaching George how to be a communist.
And it's like every time the book starts, it's them opening up with like Marx giving Curious George a lecture, but he's standing in front of a blackboard with just nothing but weird formulas that he is like just shoehorning things into. It's like, well, what you need to really think about is the time value represented by an average worker's wage and energy expended in a shift, and then you need to express that shift based on like the current value of time production and good worth value.
And then at the end of every book, it's just George Orwell being like, I guess you were right, Carl. We don't need to write clearly and concisely in a way people can understand.
Yeah, so I read, I've got this. I don't know if you were still in Redacted when I got this book, but it's like Trotsky's edited version of Capital, and it's just
nice.
The essential Marx. And like half the book is Trotsky giving an introduction to this thing. And he's like, I've stripped away all of the exact context of what was going on in England. I've stripped away just all of these comments about people that he knew. So like Capital in this little book takes up about 50 pages. And even then, it feels like you are reading just an unending tome.
God, he really trimmed Capital down to 50 pages.
It may be like 50 to 70 or something like that.
But lovely. Yeah, I'm Trotsky.
It's absolutely hilarious. And there's like a line in the book where he's like, if you cannot manage to read this, then you are not a communist.
It's the only outright Jewish intellectual leader of the Russian Revolution.
Yeah, everyone else was trying to hide it.
Ability to take bullshit from people was so low, and it was awesome.
Yeah. Who was I talking to about this? There was someone I was talking to a while ago about Trotsky, and I was making a joke, and they're like, yeah, Trotsky was a good guy. I was like, no, he wasn't. You need to read about this guy's life. Like, he was entertaining and he had good ideas, but he was not a good man.
No.
They're like, yeah, I guess not. I was like, watch it, because you're going to be a tanky if you keep down that path.
Yeah. There was no functional way for him to be a good person.
No. It's like, so I've got a friend
to be a monster.
Yeah, and so it's deviating far from Orwell, but meh. So like I've got a friend in town who is originally from some small town in Ukraine and lived in Moscow for a little while, and he was telling me about people he had met when he was a kid who were like fighters in the Bolshevik Revolution.
Holy shit.
And we were talking about this during like all the uprisings and everything. And I was saying, there are people I've met who really want this to turn into an armed struggle and all that. And he goes, they don't know what that means. I was like, no, they don't. And he goes, you don't know what that means. Don't say that. And I was like, okay. And he goes, I've seen the people who have been in those fights. They are no longer human. There is something in their eyes that shows that they are not human anymore. I was like, yeah, all right. Like, yeah. And there's some... Huh?
The Russian Revolution, bad place and time to be.
Absolutely. But I think it might have been Behind the Bastards, but there's some other podcast I was listening to that was talking about like the lengths that an armed revolt has to go to in order to succeed, that render everyone who takes part in it like just shells.
Yeah.
The utter depths of horror that you have to go through to overthrow a system. And it's like, yeah.
When like all the power of the state is laid out in front of you and you have like your home-owned rifle.
And not even just your state, but the allied states that you are fighting against. Like I think one of the failings of the American education system, but even like within leftist movements and trying to like educate each other about like these struggles is you talk about the Bolshevik Revolution and like all the things that people had to do to make it succeed. And then you just kind of brush over the next 20 years of a constant conflict, both with White Russians and then expeditionary forces from every other Western country that were trying to just eliminate Trotsky, Lenin, and everyone else. So like Trotsky and Lenin living on armored trains for
going from place to place all the time.
Yeah, and just fucking brutal. So
any of those successful revolutions, just like there's so many enemies so immediately that you just wind up like almost divorced from reality because of the fear that happens.
Yeah, and you turn into a cornered animal.
Yeah, I think about how Maximilian Robespierre started his career in some ways as an anti-capital punishment advocate.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and then
and then he was just like sending armies to burn an entire part of France.
Yep.
Like, you can't maintain values and do that shit in any way.
Ugh. Chilling shit.
Someone figured out. Overthrow your government, but do it in like a cool, laid-back way.
Yeah, just be like the dude, you know.
Yeah.
Go up with a Molotov cocktail in one hand and then a White Russian drink in the other.
Yeah.
You know, that's
if the Big Lebowski met the Zapatistas, that's really what we're going for here. Speaking of incredibly violent and horrific revolutions that render people a shell of their former selves.
We're talking about crypto?
Yeah, exactly. Your Yukon currency.
My Yukon coin.
The third and final moment of George Orwell's life that I want us to consider before we get into details of right-wing bullshit is when he becomes actually cool for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
George fights fascists, he throws bombs, and he almost gets killed by Stalinists, all of which is based. You're not hip with the kids, Aaron? Do you not like based?
How many podcasts are there that refer to George Orwell as based?
Is based? And this one is...
do they do that on Chapo? Is that a Chapo Trap House thing? Yeah.
Yeah. Become the dirtbag left. And start saying misogyny words.
Hell yeah. Or what's the other one that people like? Red Scare podcast?
Oh yeah.
I've never listened to that
one. The Chocolate House. Yeah. Yep.
Do you think Red Scare podcast was around in the Spanish Revolution? Let's find out.
Yeah, let's find out. Yes, we are in fact talking about the Spanish Civil War.
Civil War, not revolution.
Yeah.
I'm a fool.
Literature major.
Yeah, literature, not history. Thank you very much.
For those of you who aren't familiar with the Spanish Civil War, it's a lot that you won't be able to picture, so I'm going to explain it very clearly.
Not without charts.
Yeah. Imagine you're living in the before times, the 1930s, 20s and 30s, a time way before our own. It isn't now. It's before. It's so far in the past that it's in no way relevant to what's happening now. It might as well be Middle Earth or Star Wars. In this fantastical wonderland that is Spain about 100 years ago, liberal capitalism is the dominant system in the world, but because of some flaws at its core, it's created economic downturns, endless wars, wealth inequality, and global environmental catastrophes.
That's unfamiliar.
Yeah, can't fucking picture it.
Yeah.
These all mean that economies are crashing repeatedly, no one knows why, and no one quite knows how to stop it. Everything is chaos, and it's perpetually getting worse.
Completely alien.
Yeah, might as well be a fantasy novel.
Yeah, I got to go turn on my replicator to get another can of beer here.
Yeah, exactly. All this unrest is obviously hardest on poor people. And as poor people starve, everyone begins to take a long, hard look at why we have a goddamn society in the fucking first place. If we're just going to let bullshit like this happen all the time. And all this societal introspection means radical politics is on the rise. Everyone is picking a side and becoming entrenched. In the before times, this creates I don't know, let's like call it a culture war, a term I'm coining here.
Never heard this before. These two words have never been.
If you can imagine a culture war, Aaron, just like really use your thinky parts and picture a society so fragmented about politics and economics and morality that it's almost an impossible problem to fix.
It's beyond my reckoning.
You can't get it.
I can't get there. I don't. Surely there was an easy way. Surely these people saw their ideological opponents and said, we can solve our problem with a friendly debate on a stage.
Yep. Yeah? With two of the oldest people we can find in the whole world.
Exactly.
They'll know how to do it.
They will drool into the microphone, and based on the drool that is pooled at the base of the microphone, by the end of the debate, we will determine the winner. For the person who manages to produce the most drool is the most physically apt among us, because this shows that their body is working properly. And if their body is working properly, then they are in tune with their mind, and thus more appropriate to lead a nation.
And that's how Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
That's how Joe Biden won the election in 20.
Yep. And speaking of Joe Biden, in the midst of this culture war and societal upheaval and environmental collapse, liberal governments are years behind the times and have no idea what the fuck to do about it. So they do what they do best, which is next to fucking nothing. But when they try to do a tiny bit to keep the poorest people in society from starving, rich people are thrown into a fucking frenzy. They collectively shout to each other in the guttural, deep speech of the all-powerful demon Mammon. Not let my workers starve to death? What are we, a bunch of communists? Then they collectively take up arms to fight for their right to force babies to make matches and mine coal and shit like that. It's before, Aaron. You can't imagine it.
Horrific times.
So the left and the right begin to fight in the street over what the course of society will be: baby coal miners or human decency.
Oh, thank God we chose human decency.
Yeah. And liberals watch aghast from a brunch table nearby in Guernica, insisting that this isn't a time to be divisive.
Guernica, why do I know that name? Nothing bad happened there,
nothing bad happened in Guernica.
Yeah.
And if it did, it was before the time that isn't now, and you could never imagine it. Now, all of this is a gross simplification of the conditions that created all the unrest at the beginning of the 20th century, but it is more or less accurate. And nowhere in the whole of the Western world was there more political unrest than Spain. Like, Spain in this time period is what Fox News thinks Portland is right now.
Or to be fair, what our mayor thinks Portland is.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
What Ted Wheeler thinks Portland is right now. It's actually bomb-throwing anarchists murdering nuns, communists killing their boss, fascist death squads, a full-on civil war, and trans cat girls forcing straight white men to get gay married. Don't check that last one. It's true. You don't need to look it up. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why Barcelona is so weird today.
Yeah. That's why it has all that Gaudi architecture. He was made to get gay married by a trans cat girl, and he never recovered. Because of all this unrest, idealistic young weirdos from all over Europe get on boats to die in Spain, and George Orwell is one of them. His time in Spain is an important area for us to focus on because it is the moment where the lessons from Orwell's youth and his time as a cop begin to condense into one coherent ideology. He's always been a leftist, or at least a champagne socialist,
That was the follow-up for Oasis hit song Champagne Supernova.
Yeah. Champagne Socialist.
Was that a thing when you were in college? Oasis? Did people listen to Oasis?
No one listened to Oasis, but the
Oh,
song covers of the song Champagne Supernova came back around, if that's comforting.
That's amazing.
Oasis kind of faded into that Creed nebulous space that people forget existed.
Yeah.
Except, of course, Wonderwall. Did Oasis do Wonderwall?
They did Wonderwall. I think they were on the same album.
Wonderwall was still around, unfortunately.
Yeah, anyway, here's Wonderwall.
Yeah. I think just because of that bit, maybe.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, this is just expected that if you have an acoustic guitar, you're going to learn Wonderwall. You have no control over it. You pick up the acoustic guitar from Guitar Center. The guy taps the sign that says no stairway, and then you hand over your credit card, and they hand over the chords and tabs and sheet music for Wonderwall.
You have to play it before they let you leave.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he's always a leftist or a champagne socialist. However, it was here that he pivoted to like a more modern form of political leftism. Some might say reasonable form of political leftism. The strange thing about Spain at this time was the wide variety of political persuasions that had power. Normally you get like 2, maybe 3 if you're lucky. But in Spain, liberals had an army, fascists had an army, anarchists had an army, socialists had like 4 armies, Marxists had an army, Trotskyists had an army, Stalinists had like 1 or 2 armies.
Everyone was playing Risk.
Yeah, everyone was playing Risk in the city of Barcelona.
Yeah.
And all of these armies viewed themselves as very different from one another. Orwell was part of a communist organization that, while being incredibly communist, stood in opposition to the policies of Joe Stalin, and the other communist organizations were Stalinist at the time.
Mm-hmm.
This meant that George Orwell's army didn't receive any Soviet weapons or funding or training, unlike the pro-Stalinist communists, which clearly a mistake on their part.
Yes.
And not only that, because the left is collectionally messy, the Stalinist communists, of course, accused the non-Stalinist communists of being traitors to the cause and, of course, secret fascists.
Yeah. CIA ops.
Yeah, if you've ever been on Twitter, is the truest thing in the world.
Yes.
If you don't agree with me on everything, you are a fed. Classic.
Some things never change.
Never change. And none of these grew, and of course, they weren't either of those things. And this all came to a head during the Barcelona May Days of 1937, when anarchists, communists, and Republicans all took a break from fighting the fascists to instead fight anarchists, communists, and Republicans that disagreed with them. And it's just people in Barcelona killing people over interpretations of paragraphs of Karl Marx.
Yeah, I like to complain about DSA being needlessly pedantic and rules-oriented, but it's got nothing on this.
Yeah, no. No. This is if the DSA had heavy machine guns. They should follow their bylaws.
Let us pray that never happens.
You will raise your hand in the Zoom call.
You did not take part in Stack properly. A death squad has been dispatched to your home.
Up against the wall, comrade, for caucusing incorrectly. Yeah. So Orwell had to flee Spain because of all this political infighting. He got shot through the neck by the fascists. He was in the hospital, and the Stalinist communists declared him a Trotskyite, which was a killable offense if you were a Stalinist.
Did not like each other.
No.
Stalin and
so George Orwell,
you might say it came to a head later.
You
get it? Because he got stabbed in the head with a pickaxe.
Got the head thing.
Got the head thing. Got
ruined his whole South American.
Right?
Motherfucking Joe Stalin. You rob one bank with grenades and suddenly you think you can do whatever you want.
just the worst.
Oh, and of course, nothing to do with the fact that Trotsky was the only openly Jewish member of the Russian Revolution.
Nothing to do with that. There, as we all know, under the Supreme Soviet, all peoples are equal.
Yep.
Georgians, Russians, other Russians, some other Georgians,
the right Siberians.
The right Siberians, no one else, but that's all there is.
Yeah, those are all of the people.
Those are all of the people, indeed.
Yeah. So George Orwell has to flee Spain with both the fascists and the communists hot on his heels. And that experience would contribute to George Orwell's lifelong distrust of state communism.
Mm-hmm.
This distrust is, in fact, why the right can't read George Orwell. They know nothing about his life. They know nothing about leftist infighting, and they know nothing about his lifelong commitment to socialism and communism. They simply read that he didn't like Stalin and think he was a Jeff Bezos-esque capitalist fighting for the free market, which couldn't be further from the truth. Well,
I think it's even like more basic than that. They just see. I mean, all right. So what it ultimately gets to, and I'm sure you'll get to this, is that 1984 has scary government.
Yeah.
And they don't have to read 1984 because it is in the it's culturally known that 1984 is about scary government. That's all they need to know.
Yeah. And all scary
we don't
government.
Like it. Orwell didn't like scary government. Thus, he's one of us.
Yeah. He must be a libertarian.
He must be a libertarian.
1984 cryptocurrency is coming.
Oh, boy.
You know it'll be here.
Ingsoc coin coming soon.
And fucking Ted Cruz will tweet about it, and then
do you think so? This just popped into my head. So there's the whole bit in 1984 about the book written by Goldstein. Here's a crazy idea. It's a crazy idea. We don't have to think about it too hard. As we say in my day job, we don't have to solve this here. Do you think there's like a bridge of casual anti-Semitism, scary Jewish name being involved here?
That can't be possible.
That can't be possible.
George Orwell wasn't trying to comment on Jewish revolutionaries in any way.
And there's no need to misinterpret this at all. It's much like the rest of George Orwell's work. George Orwell, famed libertarian.
Yeah, so George Orwell.
Yeah, George Orwell. Yeah.
George Orwell, obviously a brilliant writer.
We covered that.
Yeah, great writer. Yeah. A left-wing freedom fighter, killed a lot of, but he fought in Spain. He killed a lot of fascists in Spain, but he really tried.
Which is more than a lot of people in many left-wing organizations today can say.
This is true.
If you go up to a left-winger in, modern day America and you say, have you gone to Spain and tried to kill Nazis? They're probably going to say no.
But they will tell you all about their semester abroad.
They will tell you all about their semester abroad in Canada, where it's safe to travel.
And how it wasn't bougie to have a semester abroad. They're still members of the proletariat.
I didn't have a semester abroad.
You didn't have a multiple years abroad.
I didn't have a semester abroad in one of the potentially most aristocratic cities in the former British Empire. No.
One day I will execute you as counter-revolutionary swine, but
it's always gonna happen. It's only a matter of it's like you're charting a person's growth on the left. We all start off tankies.
Yep.
All start off very big fans of Comrade Joe.
Yep.
And then eventually you're executed for being counter-revolutionary. There's just no escaping.
The full Leon Trotsky.
Exactly. I've got the glasses. I'm already on the way.
You do have the glasses.
Yeah. And
you, like Leon Trotsky, are very interested in meeting minutes and general rules of order.
Yes, exactly. So the fact that was my job for 5 years.
So this is worth saying at the top of any time you talk about Orwell is he sucked. And we're not defending him here. He was pretty racist. He was incredibly homophobic, and he was, in general, the worst crime of all. Very, very British.
There's always a big ol' asterisk when you're describing most historical figures, and that asterisk is for their time.
Yeah,
they were all right.
Yeah. George Orwell was good in the 1930s British division of morality, which is the T-ball of morality. But he was swinging for the fences. Yeah. So, just a quick rundown on Orwell, in case you didn't listen to the first bit. He wrote lots of things I would personally describe as pretty good if you're into those sort of books. But you probably know his two most seminal works, 1984 and Animal Farm. Those made the big bucks. They are both bleak depictions of totalitarianism that someone made you read in high school. 1984, dark and gritty, dystopian drama, kind of the Christopher Nolan of the George Orwell.
I willingly read 1984. That was not on the docket in rural Tennessee.
They didn't let you read 1984.
Well, it wasn't that they didn't let me read it. It was like it wasn't on the reading list. You know what was on the reading list? Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Oh, hell yeah.
And that was a freshman year book, I think. And it was, in an English class, and they're saying, oh, yeah, you got to write a report. No, it wasn't that. It was, you had to keep a reading journal. And you had to write down your thoughts about, all the bits in there. And I just didn't do it. And the teacher, she said, why aren't you doing this? I go, because it's Harry Potter.
I have no thoughts.
And I'm like, I'm reading Brave New World in 1984 because my brother said I should, and he's better at this. And she was like, yeah, all right.
Sure.
Yeah, just was not graded on that assignment.
Oh,
and if there is
you were like, I am a Jewish teenager in Smyrna, Tennessee, and these goblins feel a little racist.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was that her husband was Jewish. So I got away with a lot because if there is a Jewish conspiracy, it's that you can get away with a lot of bullshit if you remind someone of their family member. And not to play up stereotypes, but
yeah. The true cabal is not having to write your book reports
or go on the mile run in PE because the driver's ed teacher went to my synagogue, so he just let me drive whenever there was a mile run.
That's really funny.
Yep, just didn't want to fucking run.
That is exactly what the protocols of the elders of Zion is about. Not doing the mile.
Exactly. Don't do the mile run. Yeah. It's bullshit. It's for the goyim.
That's getting put in the book of your aphorisms when you make it big as a writer. Aaron's writing advice: don't do the mile run. It's for the goyim.
Yeah. So anyway, those are books that most people will have to read in high school.
1984, grim dystopian, the Christopher Nolan of George Orwell.
Yeah.
Animal Farm, a fable about animals. The Aesop of the George Orwell catalog.
It's about nothing else.
Just about animals.
Just about animals. Both
are pretty good if you're into that sort of thing, as was my review earlier. Read them if you want.
Yeah.
But what
I
matters,
will give. Go ahead.
Well, just what matters to us about both those books is that they're fucking adored by fascists, though. Are you not aware of the fascists' love for both of those books?
Uh-oh.
There
we go. All right.
There we go. We're back.
Portland infrastructure.
Yeah.
The best.
Little Beirut.
So I think I caught they were adored.
Yeah. So cutting this in now.
Yep.
But what matters to us is that both those books are fucking adored by fascists. Every fascist. Google your least favorite conservative commentator and just start plugging Orwell words into the Google search, and you'll find a million hits. They quote tweet George like he was the fucking Messiah.
Here's a question, and I asked this because I honestly don't know that I've heard it. What has Jordan Peterson leaned
Ooh,
on George Orwell?
I
Do
don't
you
know
know?
the answer to that, but I'm sure he has.
It strikes me as something that would he would either really embrace or reject because he's like, no, Orwell was probably decadent and depraved because he was an intellectual.
Yep, here's the Jordan Peterson podcast. Jordan Peterson discusses George Orwell.
Ah,
Jordan
maybe.
Peterson on Orwell's Wagon Pier. Yeah, he
Yeah, okay.
fucking likes the guy.
Yeah, of course he does. He doesn't have a goddamn brain in his brain.
No brain in that brain.
No brain in that brain. Not a damn cell. Smooth brain orb.
Yep, complete marble. That's what
Mm-hmm.
happens when you only eat meat.
That's oh god.
Yep. So the question is, where the fuck do conservatives learn to love George Orwell? I think it's because they might like genuinely have some common ground that's worth discussing.
Okay.
Um, First off, Orwell really dislikes Soviet style communism, which
Yep.
is fair because it almost killed him.
It almost killed a lot of people and killed a lot of people.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. He had a personal vendetta after being shot through the neck, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that tends to do it.
And then chased out of Spain by Soviet communists.
Yeah. That happened to me in Spain.
Yeah.
We were having a meeting for one of my clients, and they were talking about a spec, and it got heated, and so one chair of a group shot another chair through the neck, and that the guy who shot the other guy had to flee, and so that delayed the spec release for quite a while because someone got shot in the neck, and
you came out against the spec altogether and will soon be murdered in Mexico with an ice pick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you understand.
Exactly. That this is a side note. I got a new PC recently, and on the front of the PC, it has USB 2. It has two USB 2s labeled, and a USB 3 are the things that are written under it. And I was like, who'd know a lot about this?
What? It's got USB 2?
Yeah, it's got two USB 2s and one USB 3.
Why? This is a new PC, right?
Yep, brand new.
Interesting. Is it? Does it have like a USB-C port, the oval one?
No.
Who manufactured your PC?
Skytech.
The hell is Skytech?
Yeah, that's a gaming PC company.
It's not an indication that the PC is shit by any means. It's just like three USB 3 is faster.
Yeah, I only got one of them.
I don't know why you only got one. That's odd. My like 6-year-old motherboard has more USB 3 slots.
I have a bunch of them on the back. I only have two. I only have one of them on the front.
Oh, you're talking about the front. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the thing with that, and listeners, this is now a tech hardware podcast, is like the front bit is in my experience of like 11 years of building PCs now, the front plugs are incredibly easy to fuck up. Like I I occasionally, whenever I install new hardware or put in a new motherboard, will have the front slots working correctly, but only occasionally. And it's like something to anyway. So I always go with the stuff in the back. That's always better because that's like generally less cable management between the stuff in the front to the motherboard than it is like directly into the motherboard.
You have exactly as many opinions on this as I hoped you would.
I also saw in your specs that you got NVMe, a 1 terabyte drive.
Yes.
So that's you're going to be just blasting through stuff. You're going to load
Absolutely.
up Cyberpunk 2077 in seconds.
I am very excited about it.
Yeah, that's good shit. I've got
going from a 6-year-old laptop to this is
it's like, oh, I can function now.
A cart to a Cadillac. So Orwell hates Soviet communists.
Yeah, Orwell would be USB 3.
Absolutely.
Soviet communists would be like 1.
a loose HDMI cable.
Loose HDMI cord, exactly.
Yeah. So if Orwell hates communists, no one hates communists as much as conservatives. It's the central point of conservative ideology.
I would also say no one hates communists as much as conservatives, and also communists with a slightly different interpretation of communism.
That's true. Yeah. Yep. George Orwell falls into that category. Yeah. So Animal Farm 1984 are just basically like subtweets to Joseph Stalin. And conservatives are really into that.
Yeah.
For example, the anti-communist organization, the John Birch Society, guys who fuck a lot, have a long-standing love affair with George Orwell. They recently tweeted out the book. They give it to their initiates. They do have common ground there.
Why did they tweet it out?
What
context? Was this a mask thing?
It was just like it was a loose Orwell tweet. They were like, the government's becoming Big Brother. Read 1984. They have nothing else to do, Aaron.
Were you... And this is going to sound old man yells at clouds, so I apologize in advance. Were you conscious during the Patriot Act, like when it was being discussed and voted on?
Oh, absolutely not. I was like 7.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you were not a human. So like I remember when that thing was coming into power or coming into debate, and I'm hesitant to say it, but I think that was like the last time that you could really invoke Big Brother is watching you. Like when you make the jump from a society that does not legislate that level of observation in the open to we are paying very close attention to everything you do, and now it is baked in to society. And I was very much in that, well, this is actually Orwell thing. And then like I went, this was when I was doing my very, very bougie semester abroad in Canterbury. And I remember there were a couple of like anti-Bush protests there, because that was also in year 2 of the Iraq War. No, it was later than that. Anyway, it was during the Iraq War. And that, you would see artistic renderings of Bush as Big Brother.
Yeah.
And
that really was like the last time that you could rant about. Now you can rant about tech companies being Big Brother, but
it's not the same.
No,
like
doesn't have the same
it's not good. Like it should be ranted about, but it's the distinction between the state monitoring everything citizens do and the market monitoring everything that citizens do needs to be upheld, and like that is a significant distinction.
Because as of yet, Amazon can't murder me in my home.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to, in Minecraft, guillotine the state than it is in Minecraft to guillotine the marketplace.
Yeah. So the shared hatred of communism. The second thing I think that we're getting into a little bit here is that conservatives also really say they hate censorship. We won't get into whether they do or not yet.
No, they spoiler, they don't.
They don't. But and like they see 1984's government policing your thoughts, and they're like, that was bad, hypothetically. Famed putsch doer Josh Hawley, when his book deal was canceled, said,
"That's right.
This could not be more Orwellian. Let me be clear. This is not just a contract dispute. This is a direct assault on the First Amendment. We'll see you in court."
Whatever happened with that?
I don't think he made them publish his book because that's not how capitalism works.
Shocking.
Famed capitalist Josh Hawley.
Shocking.
They don't have to publish your book.
They don't have to. They have to publish my book, and they will.
Yeah, it will be illegal to not publish.
The Rat Manifesto will see the light of day. And at the top, there will be a quote from my friend who has seen a severed head. And that quote will be, "This is unsettling."
Jesus Christ. That is his like little epitaph, like in ancient Greek. Like John, who has seen a severed head. The third thing I think the conservatives pair with Orwell is that their fear like social and political reprisal by your friends and neighbors. A big element of 1984 is being betrayed by someone he trusts in his community.
Yep.
And that's cancel culture. But I'm really trying to get through this section where I pretend they have something in common. For instance,
well, I think the point that you're making is like everything that they do is that they have quote unquote uncommon is so superficial. It's like rice paper layer.
Yeah, it's very thin.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk touches on this when he founder of Turning Point USA and famed whitest man alive.
Did you see what Charlie Kirk had to say about the Super Bowl?
No. Did he have something to say about the Super Bowl?
He did. He said something to the effect that the halftime show, which I did not see, so I have no idea even who was doing it, was unleashing sexual anarchy to the United
States. Us with the sweet sexual anarchy quote again. He loves that.
He did. He hit it with the sexual anarchy from the NFL.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It means I was texting a friend. I was
awesome, but what does it mean?
Well, I was like, there are two options for it. Option one is that there was a depraved orgy on stage in the middle of the field. Option two was that it was someone other than the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, those are the two options.
And that's the only explanation for Charlie Clerk, man with a small face, to say that there was sexual anarchy at the halftime show.
Ooh, little does Charlie Kirk know that sexual anarchy is just spending 15 minutes before any sexual encounter voting on how to vote about a safe word. Anarchy!
Having a thorough discussion with motions.
Yeah. If you refer to subsection 6B of paragraph A.
Gives another meaning to the term consent agenda.
Oh my God.
You're welcome.
And the truly feared part of sexual anarchy, the homosexual agenda.
Exactly. It's been tabled for far too long.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, he said of cancel culture, quote, "Why don't they just call it the Ministry of Truth and just get it over with? It's as if 1984 is just the left's instruction manual at this point," end quote.
So there's an instruction manual in 1984.
Yes.
This is Goldstein's book.
Yes. Yeah, that is an instruction manual.
Yeah.
Based on Leon Trotsky's book. But,
yep.
Yeah. So while these quotes were like chosen at random, like I said, you can find anyone like them. We did this with Jordan Peterson. Just plug your favorite right-wing commentator in and then start throwing out words like Orwell or doublethink or thought police. And you'll just like find endless lists of spewed garbage.
Do you want to see? I have an exhibit to bring to the court. So there's a YouTube channel I recently discovered called Folding Ideas, and it's really good. It's a solid channel. If you're on the internet, you probably saw recently. This is dating the podcast. God knows when this is going to be released, but there was a video called "The Problem with Line Goes Up: The Problem with NFTs," I think, and it's that guy. So he did a video a while ago about geocentrism, and there is a hardcore Catholic, traditionalist Catholic group that put out some weird documentary about geocentrism.
Fuck
And
yes. Oh my God, I
basically
gotta
like
watch that.
basically duped people like Lawrence Krauss, who's a physicist, into providing quotes that were edited to appear like he was a closet geocentrist.
Oh no.
They duped Kate Mulgrew of Star Trek Voyager into providing voiceover for part of it.
Famed person who knows a lot about space, someone who was on Star Trek.
Yeah, well, you know, she was a captain on Star Trek. So you got to know a lot, because then you have to go, oh, it's a tachyon storm.
That is why William Shatner got taken to space with fucking Bezos.
God
also knows a lot about space.
We're a fucking horrible species. We should never have gotten to this point.
Nope.
Anyway, so these geocentrists were claiming that they were being targeted by the thought police.
Oh hell yeah! Yeah.
Yeah. And I like any group of Catholics who has the sheer chutzpah to claim that they are the target of a massive internationalist conspiracy. And at multiple points in this video, Danielson, the guy who runs Folding Ideas, splices in a clip of a dude who's in this little cadre saying, "I've watched the footage multiple times. At no point is this about the Jews." And it's like, you're showing what this is about. You don't like the Jews.
Yep. The subtitle of Catholicism, we really don't like the Jews.
Yeah. It's like the people who despise Vatican II, part of that is because they really don't like the Jews.
Yeah. The current Catholic religion, too Jewish.
It's too tolerant. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, that's a great example, because I find it very odd that people like that and Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump Jr. all choose a socialist, freedom fighter, anti-imperialist, pretty effeminate British man as one of the like modern forefathers of the right.
There is no outright masculine British man. If you say there is, you're probably talking about a Scottish man.
That's probably fair.
And they will be upset that you refer to them as British, despite that being technically correct.
When I think of masculine Britishness, I only think of Gordon Ramsay, and he is in fact Scottish.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is he Scottish?
Yeah.
Oh, where's he from?
I don't know. Somewhere in Scotland.
Well, that's implied. Thank you, Shark. You're really showing some good journalism.
Nailing the journalism.
This is why we were getting that Pulitzer.
This is it. Oh yeah. So he's just a weird choice, and I think it's because, like you're saying, it's like there's just enough rice paper, like thin logic with liking Orwell that they don't have to read. They just have to read like the Sparks Notes of 1984.
Yeah.
And it sounds like conservative propaganda.
Yeah. A lot of books do.
Yeah.
Like if you you can make this argument for Star Wars, right? There are lines in Star Wars, and I'm not saying Star Wars is a deep genre. There's a story, a series. It's not. It is. I love it. I love the 3 movies, some of the books, and The Mandalorian.
There is one good Star Trek movie there.
Go fuck yourself.
Star Wars, whatever.
There are 3 good Star Wars movies, and you can rot in hell. But there's a line in that where it's like, oh, the Emperor is nationalized. No, it's not even in the movie, is it? It's like in one of the deleted scenes. So if you watch the deleted scenes of Star Wars and just wait, this is a preview because I'm going to have a friend on for one of our episodes, and he and I are deep Star Wars nerds. And one of the deleted scenes is between Biggs and Luke. And Biggs, who you may know as the guy who Luke says that he's good friends with in the A New Hope, and then gets blown up by Darth Vader. Biggs and Luke are on Tatooine, and Biggs is talking about joining up with the rebellion, and Luke goes, "Oh, why?" And Biggs is like, "Well, the Emperor is nationalizing industry on the Inner Rims." So you can read certain elements as like this is a hyper weird conservative thing, when in fact it was George Lucas taking elements of sci-fi, serials and then samurai movies, and also him really disliking the Vietnam War and viewing America as the Galactic Empire.
Famed right-wing opinion.
Famed right-wing opinion, yeah.
Oh,
And Aaron's Star Wars corner.
Yeah. We gotta come up with some good theme music. So I think it's worth kind of tackling a few of the like commonalities of conservatism and reading the Sparks Notes of George Orwell.
Sure.
And just like talking about, I think they twist him in ways that are very indicative of how they twist everything.
Twist him like a pretzel.
Exactly. The first thing I want to talk about is Turning Point USA and anti-communism, and
Sure.
the John Birch Society and anti-communism and George
Even
Orwell.
better.
Yeah. From George Orwell's essay, Why I Write, an essay famously about why he wrote things.
So before we get into that,
Yeah.
do you want to introduce the John Birch Society?
Oh, yeah.
Besides
totally.
Men Who Totally Fuck, which I believe is on their website.
Yeah. So if you're wondering about the John Birch Society, I would ask you one question. Do you hate things? If you hate a thing, like just anything chosen at random, it's probably the fault of the John Birch Society. They were a group of incredibly wealthy, very waspy weirdos who got together to fight communism, but instead just kind of created the Rotary Club and the Chamber of Commerce and Phyllis Schlafly, and are kind of the reason we're totally fucked now.
Think tanks.
Yeah, they're like the first real fascist American think tank.
Yeah.
And they just begin to dominate like all of American politics. They're why like Texas school boards have like an anti-evolution bend.
Every school board across. It's not just so I mean you're Shark, you probably know, but there's the because of the way our country is uniquely fucked. The corridor of like Dallas, Fort Worth, and another chunk of Texas is so monumentally impactful to the way textbooks are written that textbook writers will write their books to appeal to that school district.
Yeah, so if you've ever read like the Civil War was about states' rights,
yeah,
it's because of that.
Yeah. Having done part of my education in the South, I heard that a significant amount. And then I had a biology teacher, and I think it was a sophomore. It was a sophomore in Tennessee, and he was the evolution unit, and he got up in front of the class and he goes, "Look, I don't want to teach this, but I have to. And I don't believe it. And I'm not asking you to believe it." And one of the guys in the class, who I'm not going to say good friends with, because I don't talk to him all that often, but like we get along fine and like we're friends. But at that time, he was a very, very big Southern Baptist, and he started booing at the mention of evolution. And that was the first of many times I've slapped someone upside the head.
Yeah, and that's to a large extent the fault of the John Birch Society.
Exactly, because you have such a huge impact on a district that buys so many textbooks that it becomes like the fulcrum of these a lot of school books across the nation, because textbook editors are not going to create books for different markets, because that's, from a financial perspective, insane.
Yeah, and like 5 of the 10 of the like 8 most populous cities in America are in Texas or something. It's something like that.
It's a fair amount. Like, you get Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston,
Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like San Antonio is not big, but it's got a weird amount of influence despite its size.
Yeah. And like the John Birch Society encouraged people in the 50s to run for the school board in those places, and they've dominated the school board elections ever since.
Yeah.
Pushing like a weird hardline anti-communist evangelical Christian fascist.
And I'm gonna implore our listeners here. I know there is a steadfast strain of anti-electoralism, and like, we're not going to take part in the broken society and the left. But I ask you, if you ever plan or are not overtly opposed to having children, I would implore you to run for school board in your area, because you can try to counter this.
Yeah, you can have the John Birch Society has taught us you can have a weirdly large effect.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about, not buying into the system and all that, but you live in the country. the shit that you can.
If you run for mayor, up against the wall, comrade, but school board.
So here's a question for you: if I ran for mayor of Redacted, and as part of my platform, I said I'm going to encourage more public transit by instituting my 1 in 5 policy. The policy is simple: on a rotating basis, we will blow up every 5th car, and it will be completely at random. But we will blow up every 5th car. Am I still up against the wall?
I mean, after the current mayor of Portland, whose platform is worse than that?
That's a low bar. His platform is, I just want to be reelected.
Let me go to dinner in the Pearl District. Yeah. So,
or alternately, let me order a burger at a sushi restaurant like a giant fucking nerd.
Did he do that?
Yes, he did.
What a loser.
I don't think it. No, the Pearl District is the one that Koska yelled at him. There was another one where he was ordering a burger at a sushi restaurant, and someone saw him and started yelling at him, and he got like,
holy shit
about it.
There's a lot to unpack there about his psychology.
It's fucking internet. There we go. Okay.
So
Zoom is telling me that my internet connection is unstable.
Dang. I understand that.
Yeah. Thank you, Zoom.
I get instability. I too am unstable.
All right.
Yeah. So from George Orwell's essay, Why I Write, famously about why he wrote things, quote, every line of serious work I have written since 1936 has been written directly or indirectly against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism, as I understand it. It seems to me nonsense in a period like our own to think that one can avoid writing of such subjects. Everyone writes of them in one guise or another. It is simply a question of which side one takes and what approach one follows. That doesn't sound like something the John Birch Society would like.
No, it doesn't. I think, like, though, if there is a recurring thesis for our podcast, it's right there in the name. It's that the right can't read.
Yeah.
And I think, like, Orwell is probably the most explicit evidence of that, because, like, we started off with Jesus, and there's a lot of interpretation there, and there's like, what is actually the source of what the sermons were, and like Springsteen, he might. There's room for interpretation in music. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, but
He seems good, but he is from New Jersey, which
he
is a
is from
strike
New
against
Jersey.
him.
Exactly, and there's such a thing of like music being not necessarily an intellectual pursuit, but an emotional one because of like the yada yada yada, or you know. So far, in a lot of our episodes, we've touched on more multimedia aspects, be it like visual or auditory or experiential. Yeah. I think like Orwell is very straight up can't read.
Yeah, because he's one of the only. What I love about him is he's one of the only people who spent his whole life being like, "Listen here, motherfuckers. Here's what I mean."
Yeah,
which is exactly. Really like hard to come across.
Yeah, it's the opposite of David Lynch.
Yeah. Who spent his whole life being like, "Listen here, motherfuckers. Here's what I don't mean."
Yeah, well, that's not even that. It's like David Lynch is, "Listen here, motherfuckers. I'm not going to talk about it. Yeah, I'm going to talk about carpentry. Here's what I'm doing right now with carpentry."
Make a movie about a guy on a road trip who murders women. Feminist somehow. It's a deep David Lynch cut for those who don't.
He's a good dude. I like that Eraserhead is basically him channeling his deep unwillingness to be a dad into a movie.
Jesus. He is a lot.
Yeah, he is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the fact that like the John Birch Society loves George Orwell, despite him objectively saying that he's a socialist, gets into two things I find really interesting about the brainworm inflicted members of our community on the right wing.
What happens when you take ivermectin?
Yeah, it doesn't cure the brainworms. It gives you the brainworms.
It gives you the brainworms, yeah.
The first is that they clearly have like a basic misunderstanding of left-wing politics.
Yep.
I think what happens there is that like the farther you get to the right, I think the more you get the same. When I think of right-wing governments, they're all kind of the same government.
Okay. Sure.
Like, it's a difference of degree in like Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany and Pinochet.
Thatcher in England.
Yeah, but it's like they're trying to create the same hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that they think the left works the same way, which is the farther you get left, the more you get like Joseph Stalin. And if you don't like Joseph Stalin, you're not on the left.
Yeah. And I think part of that is that in a sense, this is to the left's credit, but also to its detraction. A lot of leftists, and the fact that I have to refer to it as theory really says it all. Like it's incredibly hard to get any kind of firsthand account of like what like Bakunin or Marx were envisioning, to the point where like Bakunin is just a messy bitch who was basically just writing his high school drama in a live journal, but in the form of books.
Yeah.
And yes. Marx felt that he could not express himself without obtuse formulas. And then you have Trotsky, who, in order to make Marx accessible, edits Capital down to like 50 pages. That is still not accessible. And you get all of that. That is like the first hand, right? And then you have people like Utah Phillips or Billy Bragg, who are actively trying to communicate these things to vast numbers of people, and can only do that by, well, like as Utah Phillips said, like paraphrasing, how many miles must a white dove sing when the bird's breezing? There's a big difference between that and dump the bosses off your back.
Yeah.
And you don't get a lot of people by either of those messages, because like Bob Dylan in his folk days was saying the right things, but was pretty inaccessible to people who were not middle class, white, or white adjacent folks in the folk scene already.
Mhm.
And then dump the bosses off your back doesn't really work unless you're in industry at the time. And since then has been buried to the point where, I share it to people at work and their reactions are like, is this just what you do? Do you just look up old angry people with guitars? And I go, yes. Why aren't you? And there's something to be said about the right coalescing to that degree where you can have, people like Reagan or Thatcher or Trump or Mussolini or all basically saying the same message and going by the same talking points, like they're on Fox News. And then the left, which is what I think you're getting at with like, it's a very varied array, being hard to get into.
Yeah. And I think that's because, like, if you take like two left-wing governments and you look at like Stalin's Russia and the current autonomous zone in Rojava and the Ukrainian anarchists during the Russian Revolution, they're as different from one another as any world government is today.
Yeah. I would say more so.
Yeah.
Like I've got friends in Kiev right now, and like over New Year's, they were sending me pictures of what they were doing. And there was like I think it was their current president was on TV delivering some kind of address, but you couldn't make out his face. So it was just this big white blob over a suit. And I was like, I was texting him, my friend. I was like, oh, is that your guest, the faceless embodiment of world government?
Yeah. They're all like fucking.
They all dress the same. They all say basically the same things.
Yeah. We actually have a quote about this later on. But
hey!
Yeah. And I think that is like one of the key misunderstandings is that like the right is creating hierarchy. So as it gets farther right, it becomes clearer. And the left is creating kind of wildly dispersed theory, ranging from strict hierarchy like Stalinism to absolute nonsense like anarcho-primitivism. But that sort of runs the whole gamut of what you could think a political structure should be. It marshes all the way out.
Yeah.
And I think if you're on the right wing, you just can't fucking imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even to like, like if you're talking to a family member who is not obsessed with this and you're trying to communicate ideas, like it's hard to get to the point without like spending 2 hours defining terms. And it's a lot easier to appeal to lizard brain.
Yeah. Make America great again.
Make America great again. That it is. Well, we need to define a non-hierarchical structure that encourages decision making, but also individual autonomy in order to greatly increase equity. And it's like, dump the bosses off your back.
Yeah. Yep. Nice. Stop driving for Uber, being the modern version of that.
Yes.
So either they don't get that part of leftism, even though I think they probably do, because the quotes by Orwell are very clear, and I'm sure they've Googled his fucking name at least one time.
Yeah.
There's a second, more insidious option about why the right doesn't understand, people like the John Birch Society don't understand George Orwell's anti-communism, and it's that they're lying.
No,
it couldn't be, right?
That's absurd.
Yeah, couldn't possibly be. Especially, I wouldn't have an example about the CIA.
You mean the fine
non-liars?
the upstanding bastion of national security, the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, the CIA producers of the cartoon Animal Farm. Have you seen the cartoon version?
I feel like I have, but I might just be mixing it up with the cartoon, the Garfield cartoon show. And I'm legitimately not sure. Because I know Animal Farm did not have the duck with the floaty thing.
Probably not, no. Ooh.
I don't know if I've seen that. No.
Yeah, so it's like a old version of the Animal Farm cartoon
Mm.
that was made in the 50s, and it was made by the CIA and the British government.
So this is when was Animal Farm published?
I don't actually know the answer to that in all of my Orwell
This is
research.
horrible. This is a shanda. What a
1945.
1945. So this is pretty soon after it was published.
Yeah,
came out with the cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the weird facts about Orwell's life is that his licensing, his intellectual property, is a complete and utter fucking disaster.
Yeah.
Because when he was dying, he married a woman kind of on a whim as he was losing his mind, and was just like, hey, you'll have all this money, marry me. And she was like, sure. And so when he died, she basically auctioned his intellectual property off to the highest bidder a lot. So there's sort of no creative control over what happens with George Orwell shit after George Orwell kicks the bucket.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. Yeah, that happens a lot. I'm looking up. So I'm curious because I had an internship for an agency that handled a lot of these like mega estates in England, and I don't know if they handled Orwell or not, but so it makes sense that there's always going to be like representation is always a clusterfuck. Yeah, go ahead. I'm not going to take us down a route of talking about Lord of the Rings and IP rights, though I really want to.
Oh, that are now owned by Amazon. Moving on. Yeah, so like they do some weird moves, like making Old Major a Winston Churchill-esque character. They change the whole ending. They make the film like rabidly more anti-communist than even the anti-Stalinist book was. And they do this because they want it to be propaganda, and also Animal Farm is kind of a nuanced thing that draws on like Tolstoy and the Kronstadt Rebellion and all these other things from Russian history. And the CIA wants to make a mass market film that can hate anti-communism and appeal to people who watch Disney movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when this happens, the CIA like just clearly lies about Orwell's intention in writing the book over and over and over again, from the making to the publicity, everything about it. And this might be what people like the John Birch Society are doing, and other folks when they disingenuously quote Orwell against socialism. Maybe they're lying. It sounds crazy.
The jury is still out. There is a reasonable doubt in one of the jurors' minds. And thus, as judge, I'm going to have to declare a mistrial.
Well, I have another option, which is that so if they're not lying and they think George Orwell hating Stalin makes him a right-wing icon, my pitch here is that they also have to accept Trotsky as a right-wing icon. He wrote a book that was very critical of the Russian Revolution. I didn't even have to make it about pigs. Right-wing icon Leon Trotsky. That's my pitch. He can be the new poster child for the John Birch Society.
Just a big fuck off portrait of Leon Trotsky.
Right at the entrance of CPAC this year. Just a huge fucking...
Well, here's the thing. Is like, do you really think a lot of people who would willingly go to CPAC would know who Trotsky was?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And that kind of goes into what we're talking about earlier of like it's a mire.
Yeah.
to a quagmire, if you will, to get into like that depth of like knowing who Snowball is supposed to represent
Yeah.
in Animal Farm, especially if like if you're an average American in the American education system, you're not gonna get into that level of detail in talking about Animal Farm if you even read it. If you just don't look at like a recap, a synopsis of the thing in some other like a little primer book or something.
Watch the 1950s CIA cartoon.
Watch the 1950s CIA cartoon, exactly. Or like, fuck, we read bits. This is somewhat related. Gives you kind of an example of American education from when I was going through it. But like when we were going through Chaucer in my senior year of high school, we read like a couple of the tales from Canterbury Tales and then watched A Knight's Tale, which has nothing to do with Chaucer at all.
Chaucer is a character in that movie, Aaron. How dare you slander the good name of Heath Ledger? Oh God, that's like, so funny.
You're coming up in the system, you're not going to know who these people are unless you are a nerd who goes off and reads these things by themselves.
Yeah.
And then
I think that's
quizzes for their classmates in study hall. Oof. And then they're asked, why are you doing this? And you say, well, because it's fun. And they say, don't you watch sports? And you say, I watch baseball. And like, why? And you say, well, because it's fun and my family likes it. And like, but I thought your family is divorced and shattered. And you say, well, yeah, sure. But it's still, let's talk about the Egyptian gods some more. And oh God, sorry, what happened?
Now they know what you were doing while you weren't doing the Mayo run.
Reading books about Egyptian mythology. Why I like David Lynch.
Yep. Yeah. So I think like that's one way the right twist stuff is either they're like preying on, like you're saying, this lack of education or this lack of knowledge on a topic to just intentionally lie knowing that it's a lie.
Yeah.
Which is the most obvious form of manipulation. One might even call it Orwellian.
If one were so inclined.
Yeah. Oh. There is a second piece, that Josh Hawley quote we talked about earlier, that I also want to circle around back to here. Which is that conservatives don't fucking get what Orwell's saying about government censorship. And I think it says a lot about how they interact with a concept like censorship. Conservatives interact with a concept like censorship. Hawley's talking about the quote being canceled by a publisher. He calls that Orwellian. Orwell had a lot of books rejected. He had a lot of his material censored. But he was not one to like harp on this stuff.
Because he's a writer.
Yes, because that's like what if being a writer is.
Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
And Orwell was also a really firm believer in facing consequences for speech.
Okay.
Consequenceless speech is in some ways the main boogeyman of 1984. In the article I shared with you by Billy Bragg about how like, shut the fuck up about cancel culture. I'm Billy Bragg. I'm the coolest person ever. Shut the fuck up.
It is definitely, he is like, so for, all right, listeners who, let me give you, can I tell you about my exposure to Billy Bragg?
Absolutely.
All right. So when I was a wee lad, I was watching an episode of Saturday Night Live, and the musical guests on this episode of Saturday Night Live were Rage Against the Machine. They were being introduced by, I think it was, who was it? I think it was Forbes, like one of the big like financial dudes. And I'm watching this, right? And the guy goes up and he goes, Rage Against the Machine. And my brother walks by my room and he goes, oh, that's funny. And I go, what's funny about that? And he goes, well, because it's Rage Against the Machine and they're him. And I was like, I don't get it. And he goes, he's the guy that they don't like. And he's introducing
the aforementioned machine.
He is the machine that they are raging against. And I was like, oh, and then I thought about all the lyrics and I was like, I get it now. I guess I like communism. And so I started listening to a lot of like just stuff that was related to Rage Against the Machine. And this was in not like the early days of the internet by any means, but this was like early 2000s. So there was stuff like Yahoo Music just putting out radio stations from all across the country that you could easily find. So I listened to Tom Morello and Serge Tankian's music. I forget show. It was called The Axis of Justice, and they would have like labor organizers on. They would have it would be the equivalent of having water protectors on a mainstream show.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And Morello would spotlight a song. Both of them would spotlight a song every episode. And one of the episodes, Tom Morello focused on a Billy Bragg song called My Youngest Son Came Home Today. And it was, the song about someone who like sees their son being brought home from war in a coffin. And it was like just this, like I'm listening to it while I am playing Microsoft Combat Flight Simulator. And I'm sitting there like, oh, shit, this is heavy. And so from that point on, like I knew who Billy Bragg was. And when you sent me your notes for this episode, I saw Billy Bragg and I was like, oh, fuck. And paired with cancel culture, I'm like, oh, fuck, no.
Like, oh, no, don't ruin Billy Bragg.
Yeah, and so luckily, no, Billy Bragg is pure. He is, like, Bruce Springsteen is good. Like, he's a good dude who just is from New Jersey, so that's everything that you have to say. Billy Bragg is from the north of England.
Yes.
And has been involved in labor politics, both party and actual, like, economic standards for his entire life, and is just a fucking mensch.
Yeah, very cool guy.
Yeah.
And in the article I sent you, he does this great thing where he talks about walking by the BBC where George Orwell was employed and his wife was employed in the propaganda department. But literally. But and there's this quote that is next to a George Orwell statue outside the BBC, which is, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. And it's a good quote. It's kind of pablum, but it's a thing you can say.
Yeah.
And sure. Billy Bragg talks about in the article how the right wing applies that to cancel culture in a way that's disingenuous.
Shocking.
Yeah. Shocking that would happen.
Yeah.
And he cites the example in 1984 of 2 + 2 = 5 being a government statement.
Yeah.
And he says that the point Orwell's making is not that you should have the right to think 2 + 2 = 5, but that you should be able to disagree with that as loud as possible.
Yeah.
And that bemoaning cancel culture is bemoaning disagreement.
Yeah.
Which is a great Billy Bragg thing to say.
Yeah, there are fewer people aside from like Neil Young, Phil Oakes when he was alive, Utah Phillips. There is a strain of pure, like, solid people with like the right ideas, and like I don't like Pete Seeger's music, but he had the right ideas. And I know everyone I'm saying is, white man, but that's because
I am Kendrick Lamar for the youth.
Yeah, no, Kendrick Lamar. Donald Glover is fucking solid too.
Yeah.
Most Def.
Tom Morello.
But point being, like Billy Bragg is just one of these guys who has like he's on the right fucking side.
Yeah.
Every time. I think he was like really involved in Occupy London when that was going on. And yeah, dude, he's aces.
Yeah. Listen to Billy Bragg.
Everyone should listen to Billy Bragg. One of my favorite little impulse buys I bought was like this big career anthology of Billy Bragg songs.
Nice.
That was like from when he was doing pop music early on his career to like recently when he was like singing songs about how like Trump's wall is a horrible thing. But it's like this is Bragg's one of those guys who knows how to connect with people from different economic backgrounds in a way that others don't. And like one of the folks that I worked with for a long time is a guy from Manchester who's I guess in his 50s now, maybe 60s. And I was talking to him. I was like, yeah, I got this Billy Bragg record. And he goes, I remember seeing him when he was touring student unis.
Holy shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, this guy is a solid fucking dude. This is a non sequitur, but we all got very drunk in New Orleans, and he decided to read my palm and claimed that I had no lifeline.
I am very deeply interested in the life story of this palm reader from Manchester, but there's a lot happening there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Bragg is like pointing out something the right does, where like free speech is free speech for the sake of agreement.
Sure.
And free speech that is disagreement is seen as like cancel culture or divisive or etc. And I think this is interesting when paired with Orwell, because he's fighting for democratic socialism. And he personally believes in doing violence to his political enemies.
This is a very good point.
He has this quote from the essay The Lion and the Unicorn. Quote, "It is only by revolution and the native genius of the English that the native genius of the English people can be set free. Whether it happens with or without bloodshed is largely an accident of time and place." Super British guy. Or from Homage to Catalonia, when he says, "When I joined the militia, I had promised myself to kill one fascist. After all, if each of us killed one, they would soon be extinct."
Yeah, I've heard that quote before. It's a good fucking quote.
It's a good quote.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's really funny when these people talk about like Orwellian cancel culture, when Orwell, one, as we said, the quote in the beginning, believes all writing and to some extent all speech is political.
Yeah.
And believes that if you disagree with someone enough, you should fucking murder them.
Now, I think there is a very... Yes, and it definitely applies to when your opponents are literal fascists.
Yes.
And I think that is a point to make explicit to certain individuals who are very active on Twitter.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Discourse when it comes to, I don't know, Ghostbusters or weird CGI kids movies that you have a strange affinity for. Not the same thing. We're not talking about that.
No.
We're not talking about Raya the Last Airbender or something. No.
God, that was Old Man Yells at Cloud.
Is that not the title of the thing?
Avatar.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's like total disingenuous conservatism to take a guy who believed in killing his political enemies because all speech is political and he was scared of what they were going to do and be like, "You can't cancel my book deal. George Orwell wouldn't like it." Like, you can't do both.
Yeah.
And it's that thing about Billy Bragg's getting at about like everyone has to agree or else it's fucking Orwellian. And Orwell would have absolutely wanted to murder Josh Hawley.
Probably. What's the eye patch guy's name?
Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah, Crenshaw. Another good guy.
Yep.
Solid individual. No notes.
No notes. His vision could be improved. But besides that, no notes.
there is a certain individual on Twitter who had this really fucking just good thread about RFK Jr. stepping into a catch-22 and then ended it with, but you know who else was good at catching 22s?
Holy shit. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really fucking good.
Oh, I hope whoever was the one who permanently injured Dan Crenshaw is having a great day today. Because Dan Crenshaw flew to someone's house and tried to murder them. Fuck that guy. At Iraq and Afghanistan.
Oh, well, okay. All right.
He got on a plane.
Okay, yeah. This is factually correct.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the third sort of thing I want to touch on is that Charlie Kirk Ministry of Truth quote, which I find really interesting because it's all about, very small face.
Very small face.
It takes the Orwell anti-censorship thing and like cranks it up one notch. Because I think Orwell's actual critique is not that people are limiting what you can say. Obviously, that's that rice paper thin surface level thing. But the thing that actually happens in 1984 and that Orwell bemoans in a lot of things is language losing its meaning.
Yeah.
There's a great quote that I'm going to read now, actually.
Whoa.
Quote, in our time, political speech and writing are largely the defense of the indefensible. Things like a continuance of British rule in India, the Russian purges and deportations, the dropping of the atom bombs on Japan, can indeed be defended, but only by arguments which are too brutal for most people to face, and which do not square with the professed aims of the political parties.
Yeah.
Thus, political language has to consist largely of euphemism, question begging, and sheer cloudy vagueness. Defenseless villagers are bombarded from the air, inhabitants driven out of the countryside, the cattle machine gunned, the huts set on fire by incendiary bullets, and this is called pacification.
It's a good thing we've grown beyond that.
Totally beyond.
And no longer do those things.
Millions of peasants are robbed of their farms and sent trudging along the roads with no more than they can carry. This is called the transfer of population or rectification of frontiers. People are imprisoned without trial or shot in the back of the neck and sent to die of scurvy in Arctic lumber camps. This is called elimination of unreliable elements. Such phraseology is needed if one wants to name things without calling up mental pictures of them. The inflated style itself is a kind of euphemism. End quote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're faced with that, it's like, how can you defend calling they didn't want to publish my book after I defended the Nazis?
Yeah.
The same thing. It's like you're comparing yourself to being thrown in the gulag, which is not an accessible idea to people outside of those of us who have either A, read history, or B, seen Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, where Spock famed documentary, where Kirk and Spock are sent to Kirk and Bones or McCoy are sent to the Klingon version of Gulag, which is an ice planet, and Kirk decides to try and shtup a bounty hunter who is a shapeshifter.
Jesus Christ, some of the writing in those is thin.
Undiscovered Country is really fucking good. Like, aside from the elements where it's clear that Shatner wanted to do something.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, like, but no, Undiscovered Country is really fucking good. If you have not seen it recently, you should. That's my takeaway from this episode.
Aaron's Star Trek corner.
Yeah. Multiple corners.
Multiple so many star-related corners.
Yeah. Just wait till we get to Stargate.
The movie or the TV show.
I like both for different reasons.
That's fair.
Kurt Russell in the movie is a goddamn delight. The show is such fucking kitsch that you just can't beat. Like, it's
Richard Dean Anderson in the show is also such a fucking delight.
He is, but I like that he plays the same character as Kurt Russell.
Yes.
Kurt Russell plays a suicidal alcoholic who has seen his kid shoot himself. And Richard Dean Anderson is an affable dude who just happens to travel the stars.
Who has also seen his kid shoot himself.
Completely different personalities, but the same character.
Yeah, really great. So outside of Stargate.
Sorry.
I think the interesting thing about that Charlie Kirk quote for me is that, like, Charlie Kirk is directly trying to take the meaning out of language.
Yep.
And that's Orwell's big fear. It's not just government censorship. It's governments controlling the world through euphemism.
Yep.
And Charlie Kirk is a person who uses phrases like enhanced interrogation or collateral damage.
Yeah.
Or my favorite, the Clear Skies Act of 2003, which is just about letting people pollute stuff. I'm still mad about it. I was 6, but whatever. Or God forbid, fucking freedom fries, which I'm also still mad about. Just a slow head shake and stare into the foreground.
I mean, this is the thing that America in particular has always been prey to this stuff.
Yeah.
Like we've done the equivalent of freedom fries multiple times in our country's history. We are a nation that is founded on ginning up popular support for an unjust action based on the fact that we can lie to people and we can appeal to their lizard brains. Yep. In a way, we are a really good country for marketing.
Yeah.
And always have been, always will be.
And it's that thing right there of, like, Americans love a fucking euphemism.
Yeah.
Everyone does to some extent, but like you're saying, Americans are particularly susceptible.
Yeah. You cannot have Silicon Valley in any other country.
Oh my God.
Like, you couldn't fucking do it.
No.
And you cannot have Meta, aka Facebook, aka Zuckerberg's wet dream,
aka the worst idea I've ever heard of.
But you couldn't do it in any other country, and because you can do it here, it then, because of the transitive property of global culture, becomes transposed to every other culture.
Yeah,
because it latches its fucking meat hooks into America, and then here we are.
Global. Yeah,
goes global. And I mean, this is hard to agree, of course, shockingly, with Orwell's big thing being like the use of language to deconstruct what it is to be a human.
Yeah,
and it's you see really good riffs on this theme throughout culture in the 20th century, and now, I guess, to an extent, but that is like the central bit. I think that conservatives, right wings, fascists, whatever, don't either willingly or unwillingly get about 1984 is the deconstruction of what it is to be a person, and how the way we interact the world is so tied to language. And that is like the most effective bit about Ingsoc in 1984 is when you take away the shades of meaning in the way that you can communicate ideas, the world becomes a place with a smaller spectrum of light.
Yeah.
And you get that in certain other media, like Brazil is a really good movie that touches on this, but no one watches Brazil unless they're like me. And you don't want to hang out with me at a party because I'll talk to you about Brazil and David Lynch movies. and you want to go and see the pretty woman or man in the corner, and I'm going to be like, but no, we have to talk about Brazil and Robert De Niro and how that was the last good role he was in, and then you're gone, shouting into the crowd.
Oh God. In case you're wondering, listeners, I have no verification, but I'm sure this has happened in real life. He had that look in his eyes.
Absolutely. Maybe not literally, but figuratively, yes.
Yeah. And I think that that's somehow insidiously comes back around to all the other stuff we've been talking about, whether it's painting Orwell as an anti-communist or painting him as some crusader against any form of speech accountability. It's that they take someone who had a nuanced opinion on all these topics and crush it down to that INSOC newspeak thing of hated Stalin, he's on the right.
Yeah.
Said censorship was bad. You can say whatever the fuck you want without consequences.
Yep.
And I think that is in some ways the point of right-wing philosophy, is to make things black and white. And they will always do that to folks like George Orwell and to everyone else, because that's how they view the world.
Yeah, I think there's. So, you sent me a few weeks ago a video about music theory.
Yeah.
And in that video, it was a good video. I liked the video. It was polluted by the presence of Ben Shapiro.
It was.
And my day was darkened by seeing Ben Shapiro. And let it not be misconstrued, the video was anti-Ben Shapiro, because Benny Shaps was talking about how there's only really one kind of music, and it's the music that adheres to the way music was structured in the 18th and 19th centuries in Germany.
Yeah.
Specifically church music.
Yeah.
And if you approach all of life with that stricture that it is either this or it's not this, it becomes a lot easier to live your day to day. But I don't think that if you, I'm sure this is going to be a controversial opinion for you, but if you approach that, then you're missing things, and it's I don't think Bach would have agreed with his thing being the only form of music, because he was writing it specifically for patrons. Mm-hmm. My favorite Bach piece is not any of his cantatas. Well, no, is not any of his opera. Not even operettas, but the fugues or what have you, the oratorios, but it is a cantata. And a cantata, for listeners who are not me, is a sung piece. It's like a mini opera. And this mini opera is about coffee and how coffee is great. And within
not wrong.
Yeah. And within this cantata, you have a man who's an owner of some business, I think the bar or something. And he's lamenting his daughter's infatuation with coffee. And the whole piece is just, it's a very light thing that was commissioned by a coffee shop it was either Berlin or some other city.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's great.
It's a commercial jingle almost.
It's a commercial jingle, and it's great. But the point being, he wrote this because he was being paid to. It's a patronage thing.
Yeah.
And this shows that, he's writing things on one hand for supposedly the spiritual ascendance of humanity, but also a coffee shop down the corner that he likes. So it's it's not, you can't, in intellectual honesty, say that there is only one way to write things, because people throughout the history of art music, because that's basically what people refer to when they're talking about classical music, is art music, the music that is done in this specific thing. They did it for certain reasons. and you have a lot of influences of folk music, but it's a limited amount of folk music, right? It's folk music from Central and Northern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, musicians are a bit more of an interested folk than Ben Shapiro is. And so they're going to work in more. My rambling thing here goes back to what we introduced this episode in. And though I might not like Imagine Dragons, they know what they're doing. And just because they are not the thrash and death metal that I so deeply love, does not mean that they are not music.
Yeah. And I think it's like that whole thing of like art and culture being objective is like a very right-wing opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just like fucking isn't. Just like we've spent an hour and a half-ish talking about George Orwell. I don't like the guy very much. I don't think either of those books are very good. I like one essay. I can still like respect him in a way.
Sure.
Because like it's not objective. Like people like the book. It's a good book. Fuck it.
Yeah, it's like Madame Bovary.
Yeah.
I hate that book, but I understand the impact it has on people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like just stop trying to limit what languages and make everything only one thing.
Please stop.
That's my thesis. And it's George Orwell's. And fuck you, Charlie Kirk would also be George Orwell's thesis.
Definitely.
I would like to end our episode today on a George Orwell quote that I couldn't figure out how to get anywhere else in the episode. This is George Orwell referring to socialists, which he was one of.
Yeah.
He called them, quote, all that dreary tribe of high-minded women and sandal wearers and bearded fruit juice drinkers who come flocking towards the smell of progress like blue bottles to a dead cat.
Bearded fruit drinkers.
So if you're not one of those three things, not a socialist.
And I think that shows you everything that you need to know about post-war Britain.
Yeah.
Where it's like a marker of the upper class who could get by beyond ration cards was someone who drank fruit juice.
Yeah. This motherfucker has apple juice. Right? Yeah, apple juice was the apple juice drinking socialists for the champagne socialists of like 1944.
Exactly. Like these are the people who have excess apples. Those motherfuckers.
Kill them all.
They were not huddling in the tube for days on end during the Blitz.
Yeah. So to end this episode, shout outs to high-minded women, sandal wearers, and bearded fruit juice drinkers.